Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Don't Risk It podcast presented by VFIS Risk Control and Education. This program focuses on the exposures our clients frequently encounter and discusses some potential solutions to help reduce these exposures. I'm your host, Chris Rodgers, and today we're discussing ways to improve the training process in your department. Joining me on the program today is Rodney Foster. Rodney is an education, training, and consulting specialist for VFIS of Oklahoma. VFIS of Oklahoma is a regional director agency that sells and services VFIS policies in the states of Oklahoma and Arkansas. Rodney is joining us today to provide some ideas on how to improve training in your organization and some methods he uses to make the most efficient use of time devoted to training our emergency service providers. Rodney, I want to thank you for joining me today, and I really appreciate your time.
Man, I'm glad you called. It's a great opportunity. Hopefully we'll help some fire departments with some training ideas.
Yes, and I wish they could see the view that we have. It'd be nice.
It's not too bad. It's not too bad.
It'd be nice if this one was on video, but we'll go with the audio aspect. So let's get the questions started off with with a simple one. How do you come up with training ideas?
Well, depends on the department and what the needs are of the department, what calls they might make. Some of the things they need to look into are, what calls do we make? Are we good at those calls? We have to be really good at what we do every day. And then we have to think about what are we going to have to do sometimes. And we need to make sure that we're prepared for those events as well. If we're a wildland station, we need to be very good at that, but we also need to have some training in structure fires or auto X or whatever it might be. So really your run call volume, your exposures around your communities, you need to do some pre-planning to figure out what your emergency might be.
I would argue emergency services probably does some of the most training in their organizations. Would you say that that's an accurate statement?
Absolutely.
So what does it mean to train to JPRs according to the standard?
Well, when you take an NFPA standard and you figure out what is an individual supposed to do, are they supposed to be able to do a ladder throw? Are they supposed to be able to advance a hose? That's a JPR. And JPRs are in every standard, but depending on what level of the organization, whether it be firefighter, captain, driver, there are certain things that the standard asks the individual to be able to perform at a competency level. And so those JPRs, the way they're stated, it's almost like an objective for your lesson plan. And I think that's what I want to make sure we understand is we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Things are already done for us. We just need to understand where to find those things.
So for the uninitiated, could you define what a JPR is?
Well, it means job performance requirement, and that's what each firefighter should be able to do, or captain or a driver. Maybe they need to be able to pump a truck or operate a vehicle or throw a ladder. Just what are they supposed to do?
So what are some strategies to improve training hours for volunteer fire departments? Because we're asking them to come on, basically on their free time, and the training requirements are they're increasing. So it's kind of becoming harder to do so. So how do we tackle that?
I think what we have to do first, and I see this as one of the largest problems, whenever we have a training night scheduled, we have to be prepared for that training night. We cannot have people show up to our departments and ask, what are we doing for training tonight? And our answer is, what do you think we should do about training tonight? We want to make sure that we have a plan in place whenever we get to the training night. Their time is extremely valuable. They have so many other things pulling on them in life, and we need to prepare a training night, and we have a lesson ready. We have objectives ready. We have the equipment we need for that training, and we don't just stand around and do nothing for an hour and call it training.
So you mentioned you don't want to stand around wasting that time trying to figure out what we are going to train on. It's best to have that planned out before. So are there some resources that are available to help volunteer fire departments kind of schedule that training and get that formalized more than just kind of, for lack of a better phrase, on a whim?
There are, and there's all kinds of different software packages out there, all kinds of different training that is available, different companies, all kinds of stuff. With VFIS University, we're trying to implement a little bit more of the psychomotor into firefighting into VFIS University. We're in the middle of that at this time. We've at least published some of them to VFIS, and they are looking into adding them to that. And they're going to be very, very simple tasks. Most volunteer fire departments train once a month. Some of them train more than that, but a lot of fire departments where I am, they have one night of training and one night of rig and maybe one night of meeting. Well, that one night of training night, we created 12 lessons. They're very simple. Most of them are one page. And really, I think this comes down to we don't need to over-invent what we're trying to accomplish. So we need to go to the standard, find some JPRs, which become our objectives. All a lesson plan is, or all a learning time is it's a set of objectives. What are we going to try to accomplish? And then a little bit of the lesson, and you can use any kind of text for that, books of all different publishers. And then at the end of the day, can that firefighter complete that task? And you have some kind of evaluation tool. So we need to say, this is what we're going to do. This is how we do it. And now we've completed that objective. And I really want to see if we can get these published so that each fire department can pick one of these every month. The beauty in it is if we have things written down, we do a much better job of being able to defend our training and to produce some kind of documentation that Joe did this on Tuesday, February the 3rd, or whatever he might have done. So we want to make sure that we have that documentation, and that's what this will fulfill. Another thing that's really important about it is you could have some things tied together. So there's 12 lessons. Well, one of them could be, one of the lessons I know in the process is pulling a pre-connect. Well, you might pull a pre-connect. Well, you might also put your gear on. So you might get 2 lessons accomplished that night. And that's what I'm shooting for, is to give people ideas to document things so that they have a better ability to respond safely.
So you mentioned a couple of the topics of those 12 resources that you that were developed. Can you talk about how, the variety of topics? I mean, does it delve into dry? There's a lot more than spraying the wet stuff on the fiery thing to a firefighter or an EMS provider. We obviously got to get the rig to the scene, so there's a driving component. Can you kind of delve into what the other avenues that those documents delve into?
Yeah, so it's everything that we need to do throughout the year. Donning your gear, it's in there twice. I think that's very important. And I make sure that people understand you're well vested in understanding how to use an SCBA or you're not. I don't think there's ever an in between. So we want to make sure that that's in there twice. If you were able to do that quarterly, it would be amazing. But we do pull an attack line. That might be a jump line. That could be a pre-connect. It could be a 2.5. It doesn't really state in the class what we're going to do. So you could use that lesson 3 times and pull 3 different attack lines. One of them is throwing ladders. It doesn't say a roof ladder, a 16-foot ladder. It doesn't really say which ladder, but we can talk about that. And one of the things in the lessons that it provides, it says, for example, one of them is operating your brush pumper. That's an entire lesson. Well, there's so many different aspects to your brush pumper: how to start it, how to put it in 4-wheel drive, how to start the auxiliary pump, how to put water in it. There's so many variables for each truck. They're really vague. And we ask, go get your department's procedural guidelines and explain that while you're doing this. One of them is setting up a ventilation fan. Well, if you have a ventilation fan that runs on a battery, that's a different class than if you have one that runs on gasoline. So again, it's not specific to a tool, it's specific to the action that we're going to take.
So it's a template for them to modify it to their operations. You're not trying to force feed this is the way that we do it over here at ABC Fire Department, and this is how
Right.
you do it. There's some guidelines, but they can, like you said, one lesson could generate 3 lessons because there's variables that could encounter, and it's not just directed in that template that this you do X, Y, and Z. There's some variables to it to allow them some leniency.
Exactly. You could have different hose loads. It doesn't mention pull a pre-connect that's a triple layer or a Denver load. It doesn't mention those. It just says deploy a pre-connect or an attack line. I think it even says attack line to whatever you decide to do it. I don't tell you how to do it because it's different in all fire departments. Another one is, one of the things that I'm real excited about is if you really look at the list, and I think the way that we're going to try to design it VFISU is we're going to try to make it a monthly training. And that way it'll show up on your dashboard. It'll be really easy to find, but there's going to be training that probably we don't want to be outside. Whether it be 100 degrees or 1 degree, there might be some things we can do. One of the classes in there is a small lesson on size up. How do you want your people to talk on the radio? And it's very simple. We provide a template, and it's like, this is what we think we should do. You don't have to use that template, but we provide it for you because it's easier for doing, if we do that class, then we can teach our young people how to at least tell us what they're looking at. It's a very simple class, but that's something you could do in the dead of winter. Map study. Another thing that's overlooked is training. We have to understand our community. We have to understand how to get to places. We have to understand bridge heights, bridge, limitations, railroad tracks. Are they, all of those things come into safely operating apparatus. And that's an entire night of just map study. And it's something that we could probably document as training.
And you also need various ways to train because we have 5 generations in the workforce. I think this is the first time, I don't know, in documented history, or maybe there was another time, but one of the very few times we've had 5 generations in the workforce. So that's 5 different methods of learning. So to go, some need video, some need classroom, written. So you kind of have to cover all the bases if you want everyone singing from the same sheet of music.
Absolutely,
because we all learn different. So, in your opinion, how many hours of training should be expected from a volunteer firefighter?
Well, that's a hard question to answer. I think it's going to have to be based upon the hazards in which you respond to.
And department specific.
And department specific, run call volume, amount of personnel you might have. I know what ISO says, and it's a lot of hours, and it's hard to attain. But I think what we have to understand is firefighters learn not only at the fire station, but they may learn something in their own job. And I think they really, volunteers specifically, need to understand they're learning a lot about things that are going to help them respond in their community, and they never document it as training. So for me to sit here and say they need 10 hours a month or 20 hours a month, they may be getting that, but they're not documenting it. They're documenting the hour they go to the fire station, and that's usually all they do. Now they go to chief's meeting. One of the things that I've been trying to explain, and it probably happens in a lot of places, but I've been to a few meetings where there's a county meeting or a district meeting where people get together and they discuss tactics. I mean, the last mutual aid call, they talk about how did they get in touch with somebody? How did they get dispatched? Do we need to repair that? All of that is training. We are learning how to be a better responder, but they never think about documenting that as training.
So where, in developing and all this, where does the training officer or chief start?
Well, he can start with publications. That's probably going to be one of the easiest answers. There's all kinds of things out there. I'm not sure what I can say on the podcast because we're not getting paid by anybody, but there are tons of people out there that want to help you with different resources. If you buy my book, I'll give you this online learning portal. If you buy my book, I'll give you the book on tape. Some learners learn without reading it. They need to listen to it. I had the opportunity to have a young man in my class who drove, I think it was either a gravel truck or a dirt truck, and he wanted to take Firefighter 1. And he was having trouble because he was driving all the time. And we figured out he got the audio book. He never took the cellophane off of his book for Firefighter 1 and made one of the better scores we had had. We met on the weekends to do psychomotor skills, but the cognitive part of the class was all done on tape, but that's what made him click. He could see it as they were talking about it. So learners learn all kinds of different ways, and publishers are coming up with all kinds of different neat ways to give you an opportunity to learn. If you have the time to go find something, someone will help you learn it. And that's what we're trying to do with VFISU, is try to make it easier for us to get training out there.
So what are your thoughts on having, multiple individuals, involved in the training programs, kind of discuss the credibility of the instructor based on, the content presented. It doesn't always need to be the chief or even the training chief, because there could be somebody else in the department that has experiences from a previous job, something happened in their life or whatnot that would be a great candidate, and they're not a supervisor. They're another, on equal footing. So kind of what are your opinions on how we should pick who should be doing the training?
Well, it's funny that you asked that because I am not a hazmat guy. I have never been, never claimed to be. I'm a hazmat technician by certificate. That's a whole different story. It's probably a different podcast. But there was a gentleman that I worked with for a long time, and I never taught hazmat. I was the training chief, but I never taught hazmat. He had the talent, the knowledge, the background. He understood hazmat. He taught our department hazmat. And he didn't, I asked him to do it. He didn't shake his head. He said, yes, sir, I'll do it. That's what I want to do. That's all I know. And so I have been in the instructor game. I was a school teacher before I was a firefighter. So I've always been around instruction and trying to change behavior in students, whether they be a firefighter or a senior in high school. So one thing that I've learned is when I go out and teach Instructor 1, I try to give advice to the students to say, try to get good at something. Get good at something so that you can teach your neighbors, because it may not even be somebody from your own fire department. Maybe you have one fire department, a guy goes out and he learns how to tie knots really well and build mechanical advantages. Maybe every department has one of those guys, but if you have one guy that's close to everybody that can come out and teach those things, or like hazmat, a hazmat awareness, or even a hazmat operations. You have one guy he really goes out and he spends a lot of time pulling hose and he builds some mazes with some pallets, or he does some stuff. He can travel around and teach that. So it doesn't really matter for me what the rank of the educator is. It's the knowledge base. And that's one thing that I don't teach anything that I don't feel comfortable teaching, because you need to have a pretty good grasp on questions that might come your way. And if they do come your way and you don't know the answer, you have to say, I don't know. That's important.
Absolutely. And that's one of the biggest keys of leadership, I think, is willing to delegate and admit that there is someone, while they might not have on the org chart, they might not be equal to me. They could be below me, but they know more in this topic, and I'm going to delegate that down because they're far more professional, and I'm not going to let my narcissism get in the way and think just because I'm at the top that I have to be the one to deliver this message.
Right. And I think, as a training chief, as a fire chief, I don't know, the adage of, the pastor needs a sermon every once in a while as well. So I took advantage when someone else was teaching in my building or around me. I'm going to sit in that classroom and I'm going to be the attentive student and make sure that, I let them know I appreciate you providing this education to this group of people.
And when you become a chief, you kind of, in some ways, could live in a vacuum, because
Absolutely.
You're in your department and you're at the admin level now, and it's in your office. So it's probably good to talk to some other people that have been through that experience of being promoted through and learn from one another.
Absolutely.
So one final question: can you discuss briefly the importance of record keeping? Because you mentioned, as much training as we do, we need to document. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I think there's so many software programs, again, that keep great training records. There's all kinds of them, and you can pay anywhere from $400 to $4,000 a month. I think some of them are $400 a year. But for some fire departments that I work with, it's still a 3-ring binder.
Yep.
It's a spreadsheet. It's a guy's name. It's a lesson. And it's the date he completed that lesson. And there's no problem with that.
It's still a record.
It's still a record. It's kind of like we go back to these 12 lessons that I keep talking about. That was the first thing that I built. When I built it, I built a little spreadsheet that you could write in with a pencil. You could say that they did it on the first day of this month. You signed off on it. You put it in a folder for Joe. And if anybody ever had any questions about Joe's training, you had it in a piece of paper. And that's still fine. That still works. When you have to justify ISO, when you need to justify for any kind of tax incentives, when you have to justify for any statutory training hours required by your state or your local government, that's as good as it gets. They do have really nice electronic record keeping. Some fire departments, number one, they can't afford it. Number two, they don't have anybody to document everything inside that system. So for me, one thing that I want to try to get across, documentation is the thing that we do the worst. We prepare ourselves, we train, but we don't ever write it down. And we need to do a better job of that in the fire service. But one thing that we're trying to do with these 12 lessons, if you have a training night a week or a month, what we're trying to encourage us to do is allow your firefighters to train on that item for the month. Leave a lesson plan up there with a signature page, and they can complete it, because if they can't make it on Tuesday, maybe they could run up there, Sunday morning. Maybe they got a little time to kill. Maybe they could run up and don their gear. Some chiefs are going to say, no, I got to watch him do it. And that's fine. I get that. But I think if we allow our firefighters more opportunity to train on their clock, I think you will see an exponential growth in your training hours.
Especially if someone realizes I need a little bit more work than this, and we've already changed to another training regimen. I give them some time to work their way through this. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, absolutely. Or if they just can't make it on Tuesday because little Joey's playing soccer, but he wants to train, right, but he's torn between family and training, and I'm going to probably pick little Joey's soccer game. Yeah. That's what I'm going to do. But if we can say, hey, I know you missed it Tuesday. Here's what we did. And there's a document that makes it very easy. I had a fire department, I don't know, it's probably been 10 years ago. All they did is had an old iPad, and they set it in the rig room. And if you went up there and did your training you could film it. And then that way the chief would say he could verify that you did the training. Because, the worst thing about it, we don't want to pencil whip anything. We want to make sure that we're getting something done.
Nothing's ever been pen whipped in emergency services.
Never.
Well, Rodney, it was a pleasure to meet with you today and chat with you. I thank you for all this great information, and thank you for joining the program. And like I said, it was a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you guys so much. And like I said, I love what I do. And my boss asked me, said, how long you think you want to do this? And I said, I don't know, but I'm going to do it tomorrow. So we'll see how long it goes.
Well, you're certainly passionate about it, and it shows. And again, thank you for your time. And I want to thank you for listening to the program and for your interest in VFIS safety resources. I want to thank our guest, Rodney Foster, once again for his time and information. Please consider subscribing to our program to stay up to date on new content releases. Also, if you like what you've heard, please consider leaving a review below. For more information about the many resources available from VFIS, please visit VFIS.com. And to submit ideas for future discussions, please reach out by emailing VFISriskcontrol@VFIS.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Gladfelter Insurance Group, VFIS, and its employees.